From the Times and the Sunday Times, this is The Story. I'm Manveen Rana.
I think that it's easy to assume that she's a kind of relic of the past. The first film came out in 2001, when I was very little, and when lots of Gen Z weren't born.
Ceci Browning was just 5 months old when Bridget Jones burst onto the big screen wearing her big knickers and clutching the diary that followed her everywhere. The movie, Bridget Jones's Diary, had the most successful opening ever for a British film, becoming an instant classic and a touchstone for messy but real, big-hearted 30-something women. But for Gen Z, young women like Ceci, who came of age post-Me Too and the body positivity movement, why does calorie counting, chain smoking, and having an inappropriate fling with your boss still have the same appeal?
She's kind of having this revival. I think she's got that kind of retroness about her. And I think that her way, which I'm sure is funny to people who remember her at the time she came out, but there's so much of her which is relevant to now and to how young people are living their lives.
Now, Bridget, immortalised by Renée Zellweger, is back in the cinemas this week for her fourth outing in Mad About the Boy. And, not so secret spoiler alert, Colin Firth's Mark Darcy is no longer with us.
Bridget, you're a widow with 2 wonderful children. My advice to you is put your own oxygen mask on first. You just have to get laid.
Helen Fielding, the writer who created Bridget Jones, has recently said that at book signings, half the audience are Gen Z. So how has this icon of the 90s and noughties continued to resonate with young women? The story today, how Bridget Jones charmed Gen Z.
I'm Ceci Browning. I'm the assistant literary editor at The Times, which means I mostly read books and write book reviews, but I also write about other things like life and what it's like to be a member of Gen Z.
You are one of our resident Gen Zers.
Exactly.
I feel very old thinking of Bridget Jones as retro. But for your generation, I mean, what are the immediate things about her that you can completely understand, that you can completely empathise with, that speak for you as much as...
Yeah, I think she has this kind of haphazard way of life, which is, she makes mistakes and she falls over and she does her blusher wrong and looks like she's just hot and bothered, and she wears these giant underpants, and there's a kind of being herselfness and being authenticness that is so nice. And I think that young people Instagram was so popular when it started, and now it's a place that's full of influencers. It's full of carefully curated content, the same with TikTok. And I think that Bridget Jones is the antidote to that. Bridget Jones, she knows she gets things wrong, and she gives us permission to do the same thing.
Yeah, sort of an every girl quality about her.
She's the opposite of an influencer. She's kind of an accidental influencer.
You actually managed to go to the premiere the other night. This is the new Bridget Jones film, it's just come out, Mad About the Boy. How was that?
Oh, it was brilliant. It was amazing. There was a pink carpet, which was so Bridget Jones. They weren't going to have a red carpet. They were going to have a hot pink carpet. Renée Zellweger had this kind of lovely retro number on. She looked amazing. And the cinema was full of people who were just genuinely excited.
And just give us an overview of the plot of this film.
So in this film, Bridget Jones is a single mum with her 2 kids who are both primary school age. She has lost Colin Firth, who she married in the last film, and is having to bring up these two children on her own.
Do you miss Dada sometimes?
I miss him all of the times.
Can you survive?
I think so.
It's not enough to survive, you've got to live.
Colin Firth, Mark Darcy, had died 4 years ago, so it's about time that she got back out there. It's about time she met someone new. And the film follows her as she gets back out there into the dating world and meets various unsuitable men.
How old are you?
28.
Oh!
No, I'm just kidding. I'm 29.
The kind of classic rude Bridget Jones jokes were in there. Daniel Cleaver comes out with some absolute corkers.
Miniature Darcy, what's the news?
Where are the ladies with the big...
Hair? They couldn't make it, sadly. They're washing their hair.
All three?
Yeah, well, they wash each other's, you see.
But it was the kind of overwhelming feeling was kind of grief is a key theme, and you do feel like you're saying goodbye to her in a way, and we're not sure whether it will be a goodbye. You know, she might come back in 20 years, but for now it's definitely they're trying to wrap things up and tie loose ends up. So it was very different from the other films. It was much sadder. I cried. I didn't expect to cry. I was kind of blubbing in the second row of the cinema towards the end. It was really good, but you were really grabbing hold of it because you want Bridget Jones to last forever, you know. So the fact that it might be the last one for some time felt quite sad.
And does this sort of reflect the author's own experiences?
Helen Fielding, the author, it all came from her and her life. So way back in the day when Bridget Jones started out, it was a column in the Independent newspaper in 1995. It was her life as a single woman. And then she turned those columns into a book, and the book became a film. And the other Bridget Jones books, The Edge of Reason and Bridget Jones' Baby, and now this one, Mad About the Boy, kind of followed her life. And the sad parts of this new film about Bridget Jones losing her husband, Mark Darcy, and having to raise two kids match up quite closely to Helen Fielding's own experience, which she doesn't talk about much because she's kind of the opposite of Bridget Jones. She's a private person, and Bridget Jones is a way for her, I imagine, to reflect on her experiences at a distance.
I wanted to write about Bridget as a lot of people find themselves as a woman later in life who suddenly finds herself alone with kids, going out and trying to rediscover herself as a woman, and a single mum.
She went through the same thing. She lost her husband very sadly a number of years ago and had to raise her two kids as a single mum. And I think you feel that in the film. It comes from a very real place, a very raw place.
Yeah. And also there's just the sense, you know, if this is the last outing for Bridget Jones, she's come a long way. I mean, I remember when the columns started and they were sort of like a great way of doing a funny take on the week's news through this sort of slightly hapless, bumbling young woman who had usually misunderstood something or got it wrong at a dinner party when talking about whatever was in the news. In a way, it sort of started a whole new genre of book too, I suppose, where you had kind of an anti-heroine in that she didn't have to be perfect. She was a heroine who everybody warmed to because she wasn't perfect.
I mean, she is really intelligent, you know. She works in publishing and later she works in television and becomes a producer. And I think she created this bridge between you can be a really intelligent young woman and still make silly mistakes and you don't have to be one or the other. You know, it's okay to be clever and know that you want a man but not know which one. And I think she kind of caught the contradictions in lots of young women's lives.
And when the book and the films came out, this was sort of more your mother's generation, really. How much did she associate with it?
Yeah, so my mum, we've talked about Bridget Jones a lot. I think lots of mothers and daughters bond over Bridget Jones as a neutral conversation point where you can both relate to her. My mum went to see the original film in 2001 when I was about 5 months old. So
wow.
My mum was a huge fan. My mum was 28, so not that dissimilar in age to Bridget. She was one of the smug marrieds, as Bridget would call them, but she also, she had been a young single woman not many years before, and she had worked in publishing as well. So for her, Bridget was kind of a really close to who she'd been a couple of years before. My mum would reference Bridget Jones. My mum had a Colin Firth calendar in our in our kitchen.
Of course she did.
Of course she did. Who wouldn't want a Colin Firth calendar? But I think the kind of Bridget Jones seeped into me long before I actually sat down and watched it start to finish, because my mum had already absorbed so much of what Bridget Jones was about and loved it and had it on. It was one of those comfort films where, if a boy won't text you back, or if you're feeling down about your body, which I think lots of teenage girls do. I had Instagram and Facebook and Snapchat, and it was just as social media was starting to become a huge part of teenagers' lives. And I think that turning my phone off and turning the television on and watching Bridget Jones, I must have done that countless times as a teenager at 13, 14, 15.
Was it something that people at school would be watching too? I mean, is it something that your generation adopted?
Absolutely. Bridget Jones I think is a touch point for everyone, and that the key moments of the book and the films are things that everyone would relate to and talk about.
I suddenly realised that unless something changed soon, I was going to live a life where my major relationship was with a bottle of wine. And I'd finally die fat and alone and be found 3 weeks later, half-eaten by wild dogs. Or I was about to turn into Glenn Close in Fatal Attraction.
And I think that if you were to, do bad karaoke, or if you were to have a day where you just didn't get out of your pajamas because you weren't really feeling like it, you're kind of having a Bridget Jones moment. And I think people would talk about that. Or if you came into school and your hair was windswept and you hadn't brushed it and you had, your breakfast stuck between your teeth, it would be fine, because it'd be like, oh, she's having a Bridget Jones moment, or she's having a Bridget Jones day. It was kind of a way of, if you needed a reason to be like, I'm just having a moment, I need you to just leave me alone for 5 minutes, it would be okay, because that's what Bridget Jones would say, or that's what Bridget Jones would do. And I think that the boys weren't necessarily in on it. They kind of didn't understand it necessarily. So it was Bridget Jones became a secret language between the girls of, who was a Daniel Cleaver and who was a Mark Darcy. And it was a way for us to interpret our lives in a language that the boys of sixth form and of school didn't necessarily understand.
So there's clearly lots of touch points, lots of references in there that still have relevance for your generation. What were the bits that really didn't translate well?
Oh, two of those things is the drinking and the smoking.
I'm afraid I'm a bit hungover. Wish I could be lying with my head in the toilet like all normal people. New Year's resolution, drink less. Oh, and quit smoking. Oh. And keep New Year's resolutions.
Young people just don't smoke anymore. I remember at school there was a small number of very cool kids who went and stood behind the bins and smoked secretly. But otherwise it was vaping. As soon as you could get your hands on a vape, you vaped. Then you kind of would emerge from strawberry-flavoured clouds into our lessons. And Bridget Jones doesn't know what vaping is, or didn't.
Yeah. And it was such a big part of the columns and the books. Every chapter, every article would start with a number of cigarettes she'd smoked and the number.
Exactly. Smoking was such a social thing, I think, in a way that it's not required now. People used to have cigarette breaks as an excuse to chat. And when I was in sixth form, I worked at a supermarket on the tobacco counter. And it was completely alien to me. So I'd slide open the door and, there are all these boxes of cigarettes, which at some point were hugely fashionable. And I know they all have the different names, and people would say, can I have a box of something? And I'd have to look at the little chart to work out which ones they were after, because it's just completely, it's like a whole language which I couldn't understand and had never been relevant to me. And I think that to Bridget Jones, if I was to say that to 2001 Bridget Jones, she would be shocked, because to her that was, that was the currency of her and her friends.
Were the relationships very different?
Definitely in the workplace and in professional environments and formal environments, especially Daniel Cleaver and Bridget Jones in The Office, because they work together and he's her boss.
If walking past office was attempt to demonstrate presence of skirt, can only say that it has failed parlously. Cleave.
Shut up, please. I'm very busy and important. P.S. How dare you sexually harass me in this impertinent manner?
I mean, Daniel Cleaver would 100% have been cancelled or reported to HR, you know.
He would have been in the centre of a very big Me Too scandal.
Exactly.
Mrs. Jones, mortified to have caused offence, will avoid all non-PC overtones in future, deeply apologetic. P.S. Like your tits in that top.
But I think even Bridget, you know, she wears these like see-through tops and you can see her bra, and she probably would have been called in and said, you know, you need to wear a sensible top. But I think in terms of how my generation would like to meet people, I think that there's still a kind of hope that you could meet people in person. I think that actually the idea of meeting someone in an office, and perhaps not them groping you in a lift, but the idea of bumping into someone in the kitchen or seeing someone attractive at the opposite end of a meeting room, that's quite novel and quite exciting.
Yeah.
Just like cigarettes are alien to young people, meeting people in real life is quite alien. And Bridget Jones, you know, she meets Mark Darcy at a Christmas party at her parents' house, and then she meets Daniel Cleaver at work. Young people don't meet their romantic partners in those environments anymore, not really.
Yeah. Where does the weight theme come into that? Because that really is a preoccupation for Bridget Jones.
Resolution number 1. Obviously, we'll lose 20 pounds. Number 2.
Are people still, in your generation, are they still counting every calorie and writing it down?
I think that people talk about Bridget Jones and weight now in what's always quite a negative way. People say, you know, Bridget Jones wasn't fat. Bridget Jones should never have been trying to lose weight. She should never have been counting calories. And perhaps they're right. You know, she's quite average in terms of if you had a lineup of women, she'd probably fall right in the middle. And yet we all worry about these things, even after movements about body positivity, and there's fantastic plus-size models who do a great job of proving that you can look good no matter what size you are. And yet I still think that it's embedded in all of us, the fact that, you know, healthy is supposed to be skinny. Kendall Jenner, Gigi Hadid, these kind of amazing supermodels who are at the top of their game are skinny. No matter how positive you are, no matter how much you love yourself, you still have the thought of, I should eat healthy today. I shouldn't eat a whole packet of biscuits. I should have a salad. That doesn't go away. And I think that actually, as much as we criticise Bridget Jones for being so concerned with her weight, maybe it's not how big our tummy looks when we stand in the mirror. Maybe it's our face. We want to have plastic surgery. We want a different nose, or we want Botox injected into our forehead. We all have different things that concern us, but it's all part of the same pattern. It's all part of the same problem.
And in terms of relationships, clearly for your generation it would be quite nice to meet more people in real life. Is there also something about the element, which is a bit of a recurring theme in every Bridget Jones film, of her being fought over by two men?
I should have done this years ago.
Done what?
This.
Fuck me, that hurt.
Yeah.
How does that go down?
I think in this film, it surprised me because, as you said, in the first 3 films, there's 2 men and they fight over her. With this film, there are 2 love interests. And watching it, I was slightly disappointed because there is no fist fight in the street in this film. I don't think that's a secret. Some of the joy of the Bridget Jones film is that the thought of having 2 people who desperately want to be with you and think you're the best and will do anything, including fist fighting in a snowy street and smashing through a restaurant window just to win your affections.
Nothing says romance quite like it.
Exactly. It's iconic. The idea that you would ever have 2 people wanting your affections at the same time is strange because dating app culture means that there's always someone else. Why would you fight so hard for one person when you can find another person in the stack straight away at a moment's notice? You can sit on your sofa and have 10 more dates lined up in the next 5 minutes. young people are in these kind of lackluster situationships where they're very low effort, they're circumstantial. They happen because you matched with someone on Tinder and they happen to live a 10-minute bus journey from you and you think, oh, great, like that's convenient, I can go on my way home from work. There's no passion in it. When passion seems like a gross word, but I think that's what it is. I think that's been sucked out of modern relationships because you can have your pick of people on dating apps and you can have a new person whenever you like.
Fighting just doesn't happen.
It's very fairy tale. I mean, not that there are ever two Prince Charmings who jousting, but I think that picking aside the Daniel Cleaver or the Mark Darcy, it's like Twilight, kind of Team Edward or Team Jacob.
Why do you think it is that Bridget Jones manages to have this enduring appeal for, both your mother's generation and yours? What is it that sort of translates across the generations? Why is she still so popular?
I mean, the bookworm in me would like to think that it has something to do with Pride and Prejudice, which is very loosely what Helen Fielding based Bridget Jones' Diary on. I mean, Mark Darcy is Mr. Darcy. The original, the kind of Jane Austen book is so charming, and to have a kind of feisty woman and the will they, won't they of the story, it's always compelling. And I think part of it's that Bridget Jones has these complicated but very handsome and very interesting men to choose from. And every woman likes to imagine herself into that position. Every woman likes to imagine that they're the star of Pride and Prejudice and that there's a man wading through a fountain in a soaking wet white shirt.
I mean, that part obviously is essential.
Mm-hmm. But I think part of it is Bridget Jones is an example of the ways that you can live imperfectly. There was that great speech in the Barbie film by America Ferrera about how women are expected to often do two things at the same time.
Like, you have to be thin, but not too thin. And you can never say you want to be thin. You have to say you want to be healthy, but also you have to be thin.
Without saying any of that explicitly, Bridget Jones kind of does that. Somehow Helen Fielding has created this character which everyone can relate to in some way, not in every way, but in some way. And I think that lasts. I think she's captured something about the spirit of what it's like to be a woman. She's like the archetypal English woman who isn't afraid to get it wrong, doesn't always look perfect. And I think that's the reality of what it's like to exist in the world.
How much has she shaped your life?
Bridget Jones has shaped my life in more ways than I could know or could imagine. And that sounds like an overstatement. And I don't mean that, every day I wake up and think, what can I do today to be more like Bridget Jones?
What would Bridget do?
What would Bridget do? By watching it so many times and over a decade, from when I was a young teenager to now, being 24, the things that she does, she progresses in her career. She starts out working in publishing in the first film. She decides that's not for her. She quits her job, which is a scary thing to do. And now she's working in producing, which she's really good at. Bridget Jones is not a career film, and people don't talk about the career aspect of it because people care more about the romantic aspect of it, and that is partly the point. But I think that seeing that she can do that and stand up to her bosses is great, and I think that it gives me confidence and it gives young women confidence to be themselves and stand up for themselves at work. Also, she lives alone in the first film in that amazing flat, which I think every girl dreams of more than anything, is real estate. I live on my own now, and I think that part of the reason I feel like I'm able to do that is in some subconscious way is because if Bridget Jones can do it, why can't I? Like, if you can scrape together the means and you feel confident to live on your own, why shouldn't you? The fact that she's single, the fact that she's in a lot of ways free, she has an excellent career. Her romantic life, she wouldn't say it was successful, but then she has these two amazing men fighting over her. And, it changes throughout the film. She has people come and go and things change. And she adapts to them in quite a human way. And I think that actually it seeps into you. people don't talk about the main characters of other films in the way they talk about Bridget Jones. And I think it's because she has this enduring influence that whoever you are and wherever you're watching it and whatever time, whatever year you're watching it, there's always something you can take from her.
That was Ceci Browning, Assistant Literary Editor at The Times. You can find all of Ceci's work and reviews of the Bridget Jones film at thetimes.com with a subscription. The producers today were Emily Webb and Sam Chantarasak. The executive producer was Kate Ford, and sound design and theme composition were by Maula Seto. If you can, do leave us a review, ideally in diary form, wherever you get your podcasts. I promise we read them all. And if this has inspired you to go out and watch the film, do email us with your thoughts at thestory@thetimes.com. Thanks for listening. Have a lovely weekend.